Good morning. This is Doug. This is going to be an episode on Mark 8, verse 34. It'll start there, but it'll also go into the parallels of Matthew 16:24 and Luke 9:23. And this was drawn to my attention by Bill Mounce's Greek verse of the day a couple days ago, where he actually begins by telling you that he thinks the most important verse in the entire Bible on discipleship is Mark 8:34. As you go through the episode, you realize he's going to say the same thing applies equally to Matthew 16:24 and Luke 9:23. What I want to also bring out is, since it's on discipleship, it also unlocks what is salvation issues in John 8, verses 29 to 37, because Jesus insists on these men become his disciples to be free of sin, and to be free of the bondage of sin. And they say, we're not a slave to anyone. And he says, well, as long as you keep on sinning, you're in bondage to sin, and so on. So he gives them the mandate. They must become his disciple to be free, and they refuse. And Jesus says, you're sons, you believers in me, you are sons of the devil, when they refuse to do that discipleship step. So we'll tie together what Mr. Mounce is saying with John 8, 29, 37 by the end. But let's hear what Mr. Mounce says, so we'll begin there.
I think that Mark 8:34 is one of, if not the most important verse in the entire Bible on the whole issue of discipleship. And proskaleo, gathering the crowd with his disciples, so the larger group along with the 12, he said to them, if anyone wishes to follow after me, then here's your three imperatives. Let him deny himself, right? Aparnaomai, this is a middle imperative, an aorist middle imperative. Let him deny himself. And arato, an aorist active imperative, to take up his cross. And then you have your present imperative, follow me. So you have an aorist imperative, an aorist imperative, and a present imperative. And whenever you see tent shifting going on, it's almost always significant. So you have to ask yourself why. But I think this is an especially interesting form when talking about aspect. It is an aorist imperative. When you look at the parallel in Luke, you'll find out that arato is joined with kath hemeron. In other words, you take up your cross every day. If we didn't have that, we might look at the arato and think maybe it refers to maybe conversion, that you're saying no to yourself and you are deciding to pick up your cross, and then daily you follow him. But that's not what Jesus meant according to Luke, and I'm sure in Mark as well. And the fact that this is daily in Luke shows that that's the case here. But the other thing that's really important to point out here is that what is discipleship? Discipleship is following. So if anyone wishes to follow after me, in other words, if you want to be my disciple, we used to say be a Christian. We have other ways of saying it now that I think are probably a little healthier. Like if somebody wants to be a Christ follower, then what does that mean? Does that mean you say a sinner's prayer and then live any way you want? No. It means you deny yourself. You say no to your own worldly ambitions, your perceived rights, and instead you live as one who has been crucified to himself, take up the cross, and then daily, present imperative, right? Daily you follow him. That's what it means to be a Christ follower. It involves denial and living as one who's been crucified to himself, and then you follow.
Right. So what he was talking about was Luke 9, where you see it says daily. Now that was the translator put that in because actually that conveys the verb here better. And that's a better translation. So Luke is translating from the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew according to the scholarship of Professor Edwards, who said that in his book called the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew and the Synoptic Tradition, that he can see much more parallel between Luke and the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, and then even the Greek Matthew to the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. So Luke, and that's why the Ebion said you can read Luke. Luke is okay. There's Matthew was number one to them, and Luke was number two. And then John didn't come along until the Ebion Church apostles, the 12 other than John, had passed away. So the 12 couldn't pass on John because he was the last living person. But that's the whole point, is Luke was very much acceptable. And that's why he does, these are good translations. These are good ways of wording things in his translation of the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. Now, with that context, I want you to see all three of the parallel passages. They're identical on the key verses that I've put the red line to. And the only difference is that word daily. So they all say the same thing, but they're also all mistranslated the wrong way, which is what Mr. Mounce is showing you. And I'm going to show you even in more particular. So let's take a look at Mark 8 in the New King James Bible. See, New King James Version. Okay. Now, it begins in verse 34. When he, Jesus, had called the people to himself with his disciples also, he said to them, whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Now, I want to focus on this word, let him. Now, did you hear Mr. Mounce tell you there are three imperatives? One of them is translated here as let him. Let him is in English not an imperative at all. If somebody was homeless and he asked me, what should I do? Well, let's get a job. Am I telling him he has to get a job? No, I could give him another option. Let's go on relief and get some public Section 8 housing. How about that? So that's not a command telling the person you have to go get a job. It's let's get a job, but I'm not telling him he has to. That's a big deal. Now, the problem with this on top of that is this imperative is not translated correctly, which leads you to not understand that these are imperatives as well. Take up his cross and follow me. And the last one is the most important of all. And so none of it comes across in the English translation of today. So let's just look at this, step back a little bit more and see what I'm talking about. This sounds like what Jesus is saying is let him, whoever wants to follow me, whoever wants to come after me, let him. But one option he has is he can deny himself and take up his cross. So the let him is modifying deny, let him deny himself, let him take up his cross, and let him follow me. They're not imperatives. Nothing about it in English is imperative. So let me just tell you something. There's something I call theologically driven translations. Why would they not tell you these are mandatory commands of Jesus Christ? Because number one, it's not in the interest of pastors and to translate anything in a way that you would feel uncomfortable, that you would have to do something to become a disciple. Look what happened in John 8. These believers in Jesus were told you have to become my disciple to be free of sin. And they go, we're not in bondage to anything. And he says, well, as long as you keep on sinning, you're in bondage to sin. And they say, well, we don't have it. We believers in you, Jesus, we believe in you, but we're not going to follow anything you say. But that's in essence what he said to them. That's what you're saying. My words have no place in you, when he's trying to encourage them that if you want to become a son, be born again, you have to do this. And they refuse. And he then says, your sons of the devil. We'll go into it later. So let me give you the translation that I'll provide you evidence of why this is so. And that's important to test everything. I'm going to show you how you can test what I'm saying is true. Let's start here. Whoever desires to come after me, he must deny himself and then must take up his cross and must daily keep on following me. That is a correct translation. So none of these translations convey, and that goes for all of them. They all, Matthew, Mark, Luke, are all let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. So the let him is modifying all these other clauses, and they don't sound imperative at all when they're absolutely imperative. And it's a must, must, must. Three musts, okay? And the last one is the most important of all because it's a present imperative, meaning they must daily keep on following me. I'm going to show you that from Top Scholarship, okay? So what I'm trying to show you is this is a theologically driven translation, which is it's not mandatory. You don't have to do this. This is the easy peasy way of teaching people, well, following and become a disciple is an optional thing because you're going to be saved by faith alone. You're just going to have to believe in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. As Paul teaches us in 1 Corinthians 15, 1-4, that has to win. And then Jesus can't be translated correctly anymore. That's what's really going on here. There's no explanation why you are not being told what these words actually mean. It's not let him, let him deny, let him take up his cross, let him follow me. No, this is a must. You must follow him. You must take up your cross, and then you must keep on following me every day. So let's take a look at the background for what I'm saying. All right, so whenever you want to do, and you don't need to know Greek anymore, my friends. I mean, you do need to know what I'm going to show you about learning grammar and how to translate things. But in order to do Greek, all that squiggly words over here you don't understand, they're actually phonetically changed into English so you can see them, and then they'll tell you over here what the what they call the case and the number and the gender and all this information that you need in order to translate correctly. It's all over there. So what I'm going to show you here is it starts with let him deny. Remember, I told you it's not let him deny, so I put a little X there to remind you. It's a mandatory thing because verb dash am. What does that mean? What does am mean? Well, the first is the word aorist, which usually means punctiliar tense. There can be disputes about what that might mean sometimes, but it's generally correct. And it's an imperative, which means a command or whatever. But why does it say am? Oh, because because they ran out of words, so they didn't want to use the word imperative or I. Okay, so they used M, and I would just keep in your mind mandatory. So you're looking at Bible Hub. This is their abbreviation. So V-AM means aorist imperative. Okay, and I'll explain that to you in a minute. And then the next one here is the middle voice, which is not very important here, but is noted here because they have the M there. Okay, so VAMM means verb, aorist, M for imperative, and then M for middle voice. Okay, sounds complex, but it really isn't. Now, I just want to show you down here, how are you going to find these things out? Because when you look at here, none of this is explained what I put up here. Where is that? So I screen captured how you look at this. So let's take a look here. So see how my mouse is going over? And do you see there? It says verb, aorist, imperative, middle. Let's do that again. Verb, aorist, imperative, middle. See that? Okay. So that's how you do it. You highlight it and it'll pop up. Right, so what is an aorist? Imperative, M, remember, AM, middle. Okay, so this website, top website, by the way, for learning Greek, and it's not theologically driven, it's just teaching you Greek. And this is an AI capture what's inside of the article. So here's the article itself. But I just want to tell you, just type in, I asked the question, what is the middle aorist imperative? And this is what you get. Very excellent. So extracted it from this. I just want to show you the underlying text from which it was extracted. And this is what it reads. Aorist middle imperative verb. Okay, now that's reverse the way it was in the Bible Hub. So they had the imperative second. So A imperative was M. Remember, A, M, and then middle. So it's the same meaning. It's just they can switch these around. And it's a taste of different authors in different places, but they're basically, you have to know these names and what they mean. Imperative means command, middle is a voice, and we'll go into that here. It's actually going to tell you what the middle voice is in a second. So imperatives in ancient Greek are commands issued to someone else. So let us go to the beach. Is that a command? No. Let us take up our cross? No. None of these are commands. For some reason, Jesus can't get his words in edgewise. Nobody wants to let you see he doesn't agree with the other. There's another message in the Bible that's at odds with him, and he can't speak. You got to shut him up, mute him, turn him off. But he's giving a command. This is what you got. You want to be my disciple? This is what you got to do. You want to follow? This is what you got to do. And then the aorist tense is when it's in the middle. We showed you the voice was middle. Refers not to time, but to the aspect of the orders. What does that mean? In short, first, aorist middle imperatives are commands that are expected to be followed a single time. And Mr. Mounce, if you watch the whole video, doesn't seem to recognize this. He's saying it's not a punctiliar tense. This is a punctiliar usage of the command here. Okay, but that's, I have a little disagreement with him. I go with people who are, and I'm not saying this has a theological issue to it at all, but I go with the top experts who teach Greek online, who are very thorough, and if you know Greek, this just makes sense anyway. But anyway, let's go on. What does the middle voice mean? It's not that significant, but you need to hear it. The middle voice imperative differs from the active voice in that sometimes the subject of the sentence will also be the object. You stop yourself. So you could almost say that's exactly what's happening here, is you must deny yourself, right? So that's why it's a middle voice. And that helps the translators. Or sometimes the middle voice denotes reciprocal action. Let them fight the enemy. That's not going on here. And the middle voice is also used for autonomic actions such as digesting food or hearing voice. So where was the middle voice? It was right there. Deny yourself. You stop yourself. Just the same concept. So that's why it's middle voice, but it's mandatory and it's aorist, meaning it's one time, followed a single time. Now, having read the rule from top sources, what do you get? You get, this is wrong. Let him deny is wrong. It's a middle voice, aorist imperative. A M M V-A-M-M, verb, aorist, mandatory, command, but it's actually called the imperative, and then M, the middle voice. It's so, what is the demand of Christ is following? He must deny himself. Now let's go back to what I translated this as, just to show you how it has to be done. One must deny oneself. That's the right command. And it's not repetitive. It's that's how you start. The first thing you do is you have to turn away from your own self-interest and seek the interest that Jesus is outlining for you, following God Yahweh, following the Father, praying to the Father, all the things he commands us to do, that you do, okay? And that's the first step. And it's a single step. And that is what is happening when you begin to become a Christian. You make this first step, and it's a single thing you do in time. Let's go to the second verb, the second command, okay? This is verb, aorist, M for mandatory, command, although it's technically, we would say, imperative. But the point is here is, don't pay attention to Bible Hub. They don't know what the heck they're doing, okay? It's a command. It's not let him take up. It's not, well, let him do this, let him do that. No, it's so frustrating, my friends. And then it's inactive, but that doesn't make any difference here. So that's the second verb, okay? So let's go back to my definition of that. Back up here, we see the translation is this. Then must take up your cross. So one must deny oneself and then must take up your cross. Must. It's not an option. Let us do this. Let us do that. No, it's you must do this. So after you've denied yourself, that's a one-time act. Now we're into the mode of you must take up your cross. Okay, now we're going to go to the final command. Okay, but this time it's no longer in aorist, it's in present. This is present command. Okay, so what does that look like? It should be this: must continuously or keep on following me. So that daily is a perfect addition there, and that's what's in Luke's gospel. He has it more accurate actually than the Matthew translation. So Matthew is a translation also of the Hebrew gospel Matthew, but Luke, I think, had a little better ability to translate than did the person who translated the Greek Matthew from obviously the Syriac text or the Hebraic text that preceded it. So let's take a look at how I can prove to you the present mandatory command tense means what I just said. Look again at the Bible Hub to make sure we're looking at what the exact verb tense is. It's verb, present, M for what? M for mandatory, the imperative tense, and then A for active. So we want to look up present, imperative, active. How do we do that? And by the way, again, I want to just show you how you find it. Let's just press this button here, and it's going to follow over here, and you're going to see PMA. What is that? Present, imperative, active. See that? So that's how you find out what that is. Okay. So now let's go look at that, an excellent resource for translations. All right. So what we just were looking at is present, imperative, active. Okay. This has the words in the middle alternated, but M for imperative, remember, present, M, P, M, A is what we had before, active. So here we learn at ancientgreekkeyboard.com the answer to what this means. Imperatives in ancient Greek are commands issued to someone else by lazy-daisy words like let us. No, it's by words that are of command. The present tense of present active imperative refers not to time, but to the aspect of the orders. In short, present active, that's what we have in this third verb, in the third command verb. Present active imperatives are commands that are expected to be followed not once, but as an ongoing process. So this is not a theologically driven web page, right? It's just telling you what the verbs mean. They don't even bring up examples of Christianity or the way we translate text. They're simply trying to teach you Greek because they love Greek. That's all. They have no theological agenda. And this is where you get the truth. But the translators, I'm just going to say it again, theologically driven translators do this. They corrupt all of these things, all of these, say it wrong. Let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Because then that word, let him, is modifying the take up and the follow me. Let him do this. That's one option. If you want to follow me, this is all you got to do. Just do these things and you can, but he's not making this exclusive like the words of command would work. So Jesus is eviscerated in translation constantly and persistently, so you cannot see there's an obligation you have. Now I'm going to tie it together with John chapter 8 now, real quick. Look at John 8, verses 30 to 47. And this is where Jesus is going to ask people to become his disciples, and they're going to refuse. And as he spoke these words, many believed in him. That's John 8, verse 30. The truth shall make you free. Verse 31. Then Jesus said to those Jews who believed him, if you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed. So it actually says, if you continue to abide in my word, just to show you the change in tense from what it is in Greek. But and that's even correct in the King James. This is the New King James. So whatever. But what he's saying is, you are my disciples if you abide in my word. So he's going to say, the key to this whole passage is the word disciples here. If you obey me, you follow my words and become my disciples, you will be free of sin. That's where this is going. Verse 32, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Oh, so then he's implying they're in bondage to something, and they don't know that it's still they're in sinners. Just because you believe in him doesn't mean you're saved. They answered him, we are Abraham's descendants, have never been in bondage to anyone. How can you say you will be made free? Verse 34, Jesus answered them, most assuredly, I say to you, whoever commits sin is a slave of sin. Again, verb tense would be more, whoever keeps on committing sin is a slave of sin. Or whoever practices committing sin is a slave of sin. And verse 35, and a slave does not abide in the house forever, but a son abides. So that means a slave, in those days, people could have slaves or servants, they're not going to be living in your house forever. They're just there temporarily, right? So if you remain a slave of sin and yet you're in the house of God or go to church or whatever you think is a holy place, you're not going to remain there forever as long as you remain a slave of sin. But a son, that is what? Who is someone who becomes a disciple and eventually gets to the point where they do not keep on practicing sin. They may sin, but they don't make it a practice anymore. They're very much they've very much overcome that problem. That person will be born again, and that's a son. Now, if you fall away as a prodigal, then you die. Okay, Jesus talks about the prodigal son who was alive in the house of the father, but then wandered away, did all these sinful things, then repented, turned around, and said, I'm going to go back home to my dad. And that Jesus says that boy became alive again. That means he became what? Born again. That's how you become born again. It's not by all this hocus pocus that waves a hand over, put your hand up, and we have been misinformed. How do you be born again? Jesus tells you through discipleship, through changing your life, turning your life over to Christ, and actually obeying him and following him, just like Mr. Mounce says how important that message was in Mark 8 and Matthew 9 and Luke as well. Let's continue reading. This is going to be very interesting. You'll see the believers don't end up in a good place. I know that you are Abraham's descendants, Jesus says, but you seek to kill me because my word has no place in you. I'm going to pause there. There are so many people, because they follow the wrong person, meaning Paul. When I tell them what Jesus says, they don't want to hear it. They're just like, they push it away. Not only do the theologically driven translators modify things so you can't even get the bite of Jesus' words. They don't bite at you. They just simply, you can do this, let you do this, let you do that. And then if you want to, you can become a follower. But, it's not an optional thing. Jesus didn't give an option, but they make it sound optional. That's what's the problem. There's suppression of what you should know. And then even when you hear it, your own mind tells you, well, Jesus is at odds with Paul. Paul says, I can't earn my salvation. I'm a sinner all the time. Jesus is saying, yes, you can conquer sin. And if you don't, you're not going to be born again. So listening to Paul will pervert your mind so you won't even think it's possible to do exactly what Jesus tells you is mandatory. You have to actually conquer it, get control of it. It's not like you won't sin again, but you've got control of it. You can get back to square zero, and you don't make a practice of sin. Okay. Or you repented and turned around from sins that just get away from these things, because my word has no place in you. And that's the problem. Most Christians today, 99% of them, do not, believe it or not, do not have any place for Jesus' words anymore. They've just drawn them off to some other place. Paul's more important. Paul's given us a superseding message. I mean, you can't understand it, ladies and gentlemen. It's amazing. And I'm talking about Protestant Christianity. I'm so far away from Catholicism, I have no idea what they think anymore. They don't even talk about doctrine. They just talk about get baptized, you're justified, you're going to heaven. That's, unless we excommunicate you, you're on your way to heaven. That's the Catholic approach. Protestants, we're trying a little bit harder to understand the Bible than they do. We actually study it, but we don't get anywhere because we've got this albatross that's hanging on our shoulders and pulling us in the wrong direction. Let me continue. I speak what I have seen with my father, and you do what you have seen with your father. Ooh, who could that be? They answered and said to him, Abraham is our father. Jesus said to them, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. See, Abraham did works. Jesus mentioned that, right? It's ergon here. Verse 40, but now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth which I heard from God. Abraham did not do this. Verse 41, you do the deeds of your father. You do the works of your father. Then they said to him, we were not born of fornication. We have one Father, God. Verse 42, Jesus said to them, if God were your father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God, nor have I come of myself, but he sent me. So when they turned their hearts angrily at Jesus, who was trying to actually mandate they become disciples and learn how to be free of sin, they become angry at him. And now they don't love him. And that's why they're not listening. He says, because you don't really love me. You love somebody else. That's exactly what's happened to Protestant Christianity. We fall in love with someone other than Jesus, and we're listening to that voice because he's so easy peasy, and we don't want to listen to anybody who says, hey, you got to do this, you got to do that. Commands, oh, that's just trying to earn my salvation. I'm not going to do that. That's horrific. I'm going to be damned for trying to earn my salvation. No, you're obeying Christ. You're doing what he told you to do to become free of sin. I continue, verse 43. Why do you not understand my speech? This is what Jesus is telling you. When you're listening to Paul, you can't even understand what Jesus is saying anymore. It's like he's a foreign message. You don't get it because you're not able to listen to my word. I can't tell you how many people I can tell. I write them comments and after over and over again, and I have to say the same thing over again because they're not actually reading anything I say. They just simply blank it out. It's a big blank to them. They can't hear Jesus' words. Now, let's see what happens to people, believers in him, who are told to be disciples, who haven't become free of sin. They're practicing sin, and they're not ashamed about it. Okay? He says, you are of your father, the devil. They're still under the control of Satan. And the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning. People who attack me, they don't just attack in a nice way. They equate me with Dan Brown and making a fiction. so they can't find the higher. They can't find the low. They'll find the lowest possible insult that make me supposedly feel bad about myself. That's their whole intention. They just don't listen to Jesus, and they just listen to Paul, and they are literally filled with hate when they hear the words of Jesus, because that's all I'm telling them, to listen to the words of Jesus, and this is the response I get. Let's continue a little bit here. You are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He tells these believers who don't want to be disciples of Jesus. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. Verse 45, but because I tell you the truth, you do not believe me. Verse 46, because which of you convicts me of sin? And if I tell the truth, why do you not believe me? Verse 47, he who is of God hears God's words, therefore you do not hear because you are not of God. So when people won't listen to Jesus' words, just take it to the bank that they are lost and they don't know it. And they think you're lost and they think I don't know it. But I'm just reading Jesus and they're refusing to read Jesus. And I tell them, just read this stuff, but they don't listen. So this is a tricky one for people have been deceived in even how Mark was translated. Let him, let him, let him. No, these were 3 commands. And it was repeated again in Luke and in Matthew. And Mr. Mounce is trying to bring out the actual meanings to help you see that these are not things. We're just saying a prayer, the sinner's prayer, is the way you get to heaven. No, you have to become a disciple. You have to follow Christ. He got it right. So we need to. I believe when I saw Mr. Mounce say this today, I said there is an awakening coming, that Christians are going to finally hear from guys like Mr. Mounce the truth. And but I want to also teach you how you can look up the words yourself using Bible Hub and looking at just do AI Google search. What is the meaning of this tense? And you'll find out typically you'll get a very high level authority answer. All right. I hope that helps everybody. God bless. Take care. Ciao. Bye.